You
She
can't
slammed the
just kick
fake
me
notice
out.
on
This
my
is
door
my
so hard
home.
the glass rattled.
This is an
Then yelled
eviction
for the
notice.
cops
You
to
have
arrest
to
me.
leave.
Arrest me on my own land? I
Ma'am,
stepped
you
out
need to
trying to keep
calm
my
down.
voice steady, but inside my
I
blood
am
was
calm.
boiling.
You're the
She
one
stood there with her arms
trespassing.
crossed like a queen of the street, acting like I
You
was
can't do this
trespassing on
to
my own
me.
driveway.
This is my
Neighbors
house.
peeked through their blinds, whispering. She loved that attention, the power. She pointed at my truck and
You know why
shouted,
we're here.
"You can't park here. This is HOA property." I almost laughed. Oh, this wasn't even a gated community. I bought this land outright years ago after serving overseas.
You can't
Every
do this
inch
to
of
me.
it was
I know
mine.
my rights.
But she
Let
wouldn't
me out
stop.
of here.
She held up papers with a bold HOA stamp. Only problem. The ink was running, and I could see it was printed on cheap office paper. She had faked the notice. I told her calmly, "You're trespassing. Step off my porch." Her grin widened as if she had just won. She dialed 911 on speaker, yelling that a dangerous man was threatening her. My jaw tightened. I knew what was coming. Fake cops, or worse, a false report that could ruin me. She screamed louder into the phone, throwing in words like aggressive and armed, while staring at me with satisfaction. She wanted me dragged off in cuffs in front of everyone. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, 2 patrol cars pulled up at the curb, lights flashing. The officers stepped out, but something felt off. No badges on their belts. No numbers on the cars. My gut twisted. They weren't real cops. Karen waved them over, shouting, "That's him! Arrest him now." I raised my hand slowly, keeping my voice even. "Gentlemen, before you make a mistake, maybe you should check who really owns this land." They paused just for a second. And in that pause, I knew this was only the beginning. What Karen didn't know was that I had been recording everything since the moment she slammed that paper on my door. Every word, every lie, every fake call, it was all on camera. And if these fake cops laid a hand on me, the real law would be knocking on her door instead. The fake cops moved closer, hands resting on their belts as if they were armed, but I could see the bulges under their shirts were nothing more than cheap holsters. Karen stood behind them, smirking, whispering loudly enough for the neighbors to hear. "He threatened me. He's dangerous." Her voice cracked with fake fear, but her eyes sparkled with triumph. She wanted this to end with me on the ground, humiliated. One of the men barked, "Turn around, hands behind your back." His voice was steady, but not the voice of law. I had dealt with real officers before, and this wasn't it. My instincts kicked in. I stayed calm, raising my voice just enough for everyone outside to hear. Funny thing about arrests? They usually require real cops. A ripple went through the watching crowd. Karen's face twitched, but she quickly covered it with her fake tears. I took a slow step back toward my porch, pointing up at the corner of my house. "See that? That's a security camera, high definition, recording live. Everything you've done is already saved to the cloud. Every word you just said is being documented." For a split second, the 2 fake cops froze. Karen's smile faltered, but she forced it back. "He's lying. He doesn't have cameras," she shrieked. That's when the real twist started to unfold. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out without lowering my eyes from them. With one tap, I mirrored the live feed onto the small outdoor projector I had set up from last week's backyard gathering with my neighbors. Suddenly, right on the garage wall, their faces appeared in crystal clarity, captured in real time by my cameras. Gasps erupted from the neighbors watching. Every lie, every fake order, every false cry for help was now being broadcast to the entire street. Karen's cheeks turned red, and the fake officers stiffened. I didn't stop there. "Oh, and one more thing," I said, my voice carrying. "These recordings are not only saved online, they're also linked directly to the sheriff's office. They've already received a copy." A murmur ran through the crowd. Now Karen's panic showed for the first time. She stepped back, stammering, He's manipulating this. He hacked something." But nobody was buying it. The fake cops exchanged nervous glances, clearly realizing they had walked into a trap. Karen hissed at them, "Do something. Arrest him now." But neither of them moved. They knew it was over. I could feel the balance shifting. She had tried to play me as the villain, but the truth was already out in front of everyone. And the best part? I hadn't even revealed my biggest card yet, because what Karen didn't know was that this land she was trying to control wasn't just my home. It was tied directly to federal veteran housing grants, and I had government-level documents to prove it. If she kept pushing, it wouldn't just be a fake HOA scam anymore. It would turn into federal fraud charges, And as I stood there on my porch watching her crumble, I knew the next move would decide everything. Karen's voice grew shrill as she shouted at the fake officers, demanding they take me down, but their confidence was gone. They shuffled on the sidewalk like kids caught stealing candy, unsure whether to obey her or run. The neighbors leaned further out of their windows, some even stepping onto their porches, phones raised, recording everything. The street had turned into a stage, and Karen was no longer the director. She was the villain caught mid-performance. I folded my arms and spoke louder, letting my words echo. This is my land, paid for in full. Every inch is legally mine, and if anyone here doubts it, I reached into the mailbox at the side of the porch and pulled out a thick folder wrapped in plastic. I had been keeping those documents safe for years, proof of ownership, maps, tax records, all stamped by the county clerk's office. I held them up high. These are government records. Try faking those. Gasps filled the street. Karen's face drained of color. She stuttered. Those papers don't matter. The HOA has authority here. She was clinging to her script, but it was falling apart. That was when I dropped the truth she could never fight. There is no HOA. This entire development was built on land I leased out years ago. The contracts expired last winter, which means every house behind me stands on property that belongs to me. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the fake cop stopped breathing for a moment. Karen's lips parted, her eyes darting around, searching for a lifeline, but there was none. I stepped forward slowly, locking eyes with her. You tried to throw me off land I fought to protect while serving overseas. You printed fake notices. You called in fake police. You lied to your neighbors. The neighbors who once peeked out cautiously now muttered in anger. One woman yelled, "So all this time you were scamming us, Karen?" Another man shouted, "You told us we owed fees. You said we'd be evicted." Phones were lifted higher, catching every second. Karen raised her hands, trembling. No, it's not what it looks like. But before she could finish, the distant wail of real sirens cut through the night. My heart pounded, but not from fear. This was the moment. The footage I sent automatically to the sheriff's office had been received, and they were on their way. The fake cops stiffened, looking like deer caught in headlights. Karen spun toward them in panic. "Stop him. Do something before the real police get here." But they didn't move. Instead, one of them muttered under his breath, "We're out of here," and turned to run. The other hesitated, torn between following and facing the crowd, but then bolted after his partner. Karen screamed after them, "Don't you dare leave me!" Her voice cracked in desperation. I stood at the edge of my porch, arms crossed, watching her collapse under the weight of her own lies. She tried one last desperate plea, her voice trembling. "You don't understand. I was only protecting the neighborhood." But no one believed her anymore. The neighbors who once feared her now stared with disgust, shaking their heads. And as the red and blue lights drew closer, I knew Karen's time was running out. The real patrol cars screeched to a stop, red and blue lights flashing across every house on the block. The moment those doors opened, the street went dead silent. These weren't the sloppy imposters Karen dragged in earlier. These were real deputies, uniforms sharp, badges glinting, radios crackling. Their presence filled the air with a weight that made even the boldest neighbor step back. Karen's face twisted between panic and fake innocence. She rushed toward the deputies, pointing at me. "That's him. He threatened me. He's dangerous. He attacked me." Her words poured out in a frantic stream, louder with each sentence. But this time nobody believed her. One deputy raised his hand. "Ma'am, calm down. We've already reviewed the footage that was forwarded to our office." Karen froze. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The deputy continued, voice firm. "We saw everything. The fake notice. The false 911 call. The impersonators you brought here pretending to be officers." The crowd gasped. A neighbor muttered, "She's finished." Another whispered, "She tricked us all." Karen stumbled back, shaking her head violently. No, those videos are fake. He doctored them. He's manipulating all of you." But the second deputy stepped forward, pulling a small device from his pocket. He held it up for everyone to see. "These are live feed security camera recordings stored in an encrypted cloud, tamper-proof, directly verified by our system." At that moment, the weight of her lies finally crushed her. Karen's knees buckled and she sank onto the curb, covering her face. But the deputies weren't there for sympathy. "Ma'am," one said, pulling out cuffs, "you're under arrest for Philly." The street slowly emptied after the patrol cars drove off with Karen screaming in the back seat. But the tension lingered like smoke after a fire. Neighbors gathered in small groups, whispering to one another, their phones still buzzing with recordings that were spreading faster than wildfire through the community. I stood on my porch, the thick folder of documents still in my hands, and I could feel every eye turned toward me. They wanted answers. One man from 2 houses down stepped forward. "Is it true? You own all this?" His tone was cautious, respectful, but also filled with a kind of dread, as if my next words would reshape everything they thought they knew. I took a deep breath. Yes, this entire development was built on land I leased years ago while I was deployed. The contracts were clear, 5-year terms renewable only with my consent. But last winter those contracts expired. I lifted the folder, which means the ground your homes stand on, the driveways you park on, the lawns you mow. All of it is mine. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A woman clutched her husband's arm, whispering, "That can't be true." Another neighbor muttered, "So all those HOA fees," I cut in, were scams Karen invented to keep control. She forged papers, bullied families, and pocketed the money. She tricked you into thinking she was authority when she had none. The silence that followed was heavy. Some faces showed relief that the nightmare with Karen was over. Others showed fear. Owning the land meant power, and they all knew it. I didn't let the silence linger. "Listen," I said, my voice steady. "I didn't serve this country to come home and throw families out of their houses. That's not why I fought. You've all built lives here, and I respect that. But I won't stand by while someone like Karen uses my land to ruin people. So things are going to change, but not the way you think." The crowd leaned in, hungry for the next words. This was the moment of truth, the moment that would decide whether they saw me as a protector or as the next tyrant. I held up the documents again. "Tomorrow morning I'm filing to revoke every fraudulent lien Karen placed in the name of her fake HOA. Once that's done, every single one of you will be free of her so-called fees. No more surprise fines, no more fake rules." Relief washed over some faces instantly, but others still looked unsettled. Then I dropped the twist that left them speechless. "And there's one more thing. The federal government isn't just aware of this property. They helped me secure it. This land is part of a veteran housing grant program, which means if anyone tries to scam or bully families here again, it's not just a neighborhood dispute, it's a federal crime." The murmurs grew louder, shifting from fear to awe. A man whispered, "He's protected by the government." Another said, "That explains the sheriff's quick response." I could see it in their eyes. Their view of me was changing. I wasn't just a neighbor anymore. I was the man who owned the land under their feet, backed by federal law, and I had just saved them from the woman who tried to tear them apart. But deep inside, I knew the storm wasn't over. Karen wasn't the type to accept defeat quietly, and with everything now public, bigger forces might start circling this land. Forces far more dangerous than one woman with a fake notice. And as the night grew still again, I realized the real battle had only just begun. The next morning I thought the nightmare was finally behind us. The sun rose calm over the neighborhood, the kind of quiet morning where you'd expect kids riding bikes and sprinklers misting lawns. But that peace didn't last. My phone buzzed before I'd even finished my first cup of coffee. "Unknown number," I answered, and a cold, mocking laugh spilled through the line. "You think you've won?" The voice was unmistakable. "Karen." Even through static, I could hear the venom dripping from her words. "You embarrassed me in front of everyone. But you don't understand. I have friends who don't wear badges." I froze, gripping the phone tighter. She was calling from jail, but she didn't sound beaten. She sounded more dangerous. "Karen," I said slowly, "it's over. The law saw everything." She chuckled. "The law, please. You think this is about law? You humiliated people who don't forgive easily. Do you know how much money flows through fake HOAs? Do you know who I really worked for?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You've started a war you can't finish." The line went dead. For a long moment I just stood there, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the house. She wasn't bluffing. Something in her tone told me she had strings to pull even from inside a cell, and I had just put myself and possibly everyone in this neighborhood on her enemies list. That afternoon the first signs appeared. A black SUV I'd never seen before parked across the street. Engine idling, windows tinted so dark I couldn't see inside. When I stepped onto my porch, the SUV pulled away slowly, deliberately, as if to say, "We see you." By evening, the neighbors began to notice strange things too. A couple reported their tires slashed. Another said someone rattled their back gate in the middle of the night. Fear was creeping back in. The same fear Karen once thrived on. Only now it wasn't just her, it was something bigger. I knew I couldn't keep this quiet. I called a meeting in my backyard, inviting every neighbor. As the sun dipped, families gathered, their faces tense, waiting for answers. I laid it all out. The phone call, the SUV, the threats. "This isn't just about Karen anymore," I said firmly. She was part of a larger scam network. And they're angry because she got caught. Gasps filled the yard, whispers spreading fast. Some wanted to run, to sell their houses and leave. But I couldn't let that happen. "Listen," I continued, "I promised you protection. And I meant it. What Karen doesn't know is that before I bought this land, I didn't just serve overseas. I trained federal task forces in counter-fraud operations. I still have contacts, people who don't scare easy." For the first time that day, hope flickered in their eyes. A neighbor asked, "So what do we do?" I looked around at the families. Mothers holding children, fathers clenching their jaws, young couples exchanging worried glances. "We stand together. We document everything. We keep cameras rolling. And when her friends come, because they will, we'll be ready." The crowd nodded slowly, determination growing. They had been bullied for too long. Now they had a chance to fight back, not with violence, but with truth, evidence, and unity. But as the meeting ended and people walked home, I caught a shadow moving near the fence line, a tall figure watching. By the time I rushed over, they were gone, leaving only footprints in the dirt. And in that moment, I realized Karen wasn't bluffing. Her reach was real, and the next strike could be worse than anything we'd seen yet. 2 nights later, the storm broke. It started with power flickering across the neighborhood. Streetlights buzzed, then went dark, plunging everything into uneasy silence. Dogs barked, alarms beeped weakly, and then nothing. The whole block was cut off. I was already awake, sitting in my living room with the security feed glowing on my laptop. One by one, the cameras went black. First the backyard, then the garage, then the porch. Someone was systematically taking them out. My gut tightened. This wasn't kids messing around. This was tactical. A neighbor pounded on my door, his voice shaking. "They're here." 3 SUVs just pulled up at the cul-de-sac. Men in masks, all dressed in black. I grabbed the small case by my couch and snapped it open. Inside wasn't a weapon. It was a folder stuffed with encrypted drives. Years of files, recordings, and data I had kept from my work training task forces. Information about fraud networks, shell HOAs, and offshore accounts. The kind of evidence that could burn Karen's friends to the ground if it ever reached the right hands. That was why they were here, not just to scare me, to erase everything. I stepped outside, neighbors huddling together in the dark, whispering in fear. From the far end of the street, headlights flashed and silhouettes began moving closer, deliberate and organized. Karen's friends had arrived. One of them shouted through a voice changer, "Hand over the drives and nobody gets hurt." His voice carried, heavy and confident. The neighbors gasped, clutching their kids tighter. This wasn't just intimidation anymore. This was a raid. I raised my hand slowly, stepping forward. "You want the drives?" My voice was steady, but inside my heart pounded. I tilted my head toward the neighbors. "They're not here. They were sent off-site the second you cut the power. Even now, someone higher than you is watching." The masked men paused. Their formation wavered for just a moment. They weren't expecting resistance. They weren't expecting me to be ready. Then a woman's voice cut through the air, sharp and furious. "He's bluffing." "Take him down." My blood froze. It was Karen. She wasn't supposed to be here, but somehow she was. Dressed in civilian clothes, flanked by 2 men like bodyguards, her face twisted with rage. She hadn't been silenced in jail. She had been released, or worse, pulled out by the very people backing her. The neighbors erupted in panic. Some tried to run inside, but I raised my hand. "Stay together." "Cameras or no cameras, we witness everything tonight." Karen stormed forward, pointing at me like a mad queen. "You ruined everything. You think the law will protect you?" "We own the law." But before she could finish, the distant sound of helicopters filled the air. Bright spotlights cut through the darkness, sweeping across rooftops and pinning the SUVs in their glare. A booming voice echoed from above. "Sheriff's Department. Step away from the houses." The masked men scattered like ants. Karen's SC.